Eyewitness News up close with Bill Ritter.
January 2025, the start of the 119th Congress. Both the House and the Senate now under Republican control. And come January 20th, Republican Donald Trump will move back into the White House, something he hasn't called home for 4 years. This morning, we talked to two of the new Democratic faces in Congress and what they hope to accomplish. Laura Gillen, who won the 4th Congressional District seat on Long Island, and George Latimer, who won the 16th Congressional District after serving as Westchester County Executive. So what's their vision for their new jobs and for their country going forward? Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Up Close. I'm Bill Ritter. Laura Gillen and George Latimer, both of them ran as centrist Democrats in the November election, who said they were willing to work with Republicans to try to get the people's work done. But these two members of the freshman class of the 119th Congress will have their work cut out for them, to say the least. They are Democrats in a Republican-controlled House of Representatives. So what's that like? And what will it be like for 2 years? We begin with Congressman Latimer. Congressman, thank you for joining us. Congratulations on your election victory and welcome to Up Close. The last time you were on Up Close, you were running for office, and now you're a congressman.
Well, Bill, they always say, be careful what you look for because you might get it, and here we are. I'm happy to have the opportunity.
Well, you know, you joke about that. Is there a part of you that feels a little nervous, or what's the word for it? I mean, you have experience in electeddom in New York, but this is different.
It is different, and I think the great difference, as I observe it from where I'm sitting right now, we'll know more as the legislative session progresses, is are we dealing with a presidential administration that wants to govern the nation in a particular philosophy, or do we want, or do they want to be an administration that completely deconstructs government as we know it? And that will depend on exactly how they direct the various secretaries in the various departments. I have worked in the New York State Assembly, New York State Legislature, Senator. I've governed in Westchester County. I've been a legislator of Westchester County. And I've worked across the aisle with Republicans on a variety of issues where you give a little bit, they give a little bit, and you get to closure. That is sort of the standard legislative give and take in a democracy. But when one side thinks it can dominate or destroy, that's a different thing. So we'll have to see exactly what this new administration looks like and how they play issue after issue.
But some of the Republicans are not going to always vote for him on the Republican side, for Mr. Trump. So there is going to be, you know, this battle between within the Republican Party, not just the Democratic Party versus the Republicans.
Right. No, that's true. And I've worked with some of the Republicans. I served with a number of the current Republicans in New York State in the state legislature when I was there. Claudia Tenney, Nicole Malliotakis, Andy Garbarino. And these are people for whom on a given issue, we can find common ground. I think we have common ground on restoration of the SALT, the state and local tax deduction. I think we have common ground on dealing with flooding. All of our districts are affected by intense flooding. So there are areas, I think, where we can work together. We'll have to see, you know, to what extent the administration will let the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans have those dialogues. And, you know, you get different messages from different people. Some of the concerns, I think, you heard Elon Musk say it, that, you know, he sort of admonished House Republicans, don't vote for anything until they're in power on January 21st. Well, I don't think that's the way most Senate or House Republicans ran for office. I think they ran for office because they have ideas. And if we can find some basis of support across the aisle, then we can accomplish some things without being told by Elon Musk what to do.
12 things you just in the last 2 minutes you talked that I could ask you about. Let's talk about Mr. Musk, not elected to anything, just a pal of Donald Trump's. Something like more than a dozen members of the cabinet will be billionaires. Mr. Musk, obviously a multi-billionaire and not a member of really anything except the Donald Trump Club.
Well, you know, I look at, you know, all of these individuals as being the choice of the president who was elected. He won the election. He has the right to put the people around him that he chooses to pick. And as long as his choices for various cabinet positions are competent people, even if I don't agree with their philosophy, and I might oppose them on certain issues, I recognize he has that right. What I don't like are people who haven't spent 5 minutes in government who all of a sudden know enough to dictate to everybody who's been doing this for their life's work and understand the ebb and the flow and what those impacts are. I'm new to the Congress and I'm new to the federal government, but I'm experienced in county and state government. I have a corporate background for 20 years, and I live in a community where I interact with people every day. Some of those people that he has around him don't have that experience. And so when I go to represent the people that elected me, I'm talking from their perspective, not just from my own ideology. And that's why there's a give and take, because everybody has a piece of this great nation. I don't know what it's like to represent people in Utah, and they don't know what it's like to represent people in the Bronx and Westchester. So that's why you have a give and take in legislation. And that's why you try not to have one person who is not elected sort of tell you what to do.
So let's dig into this a little bit. You mentioned SALT. If that's going to be one of your top three things, then let me hear that. What are your top three things? If you could just say, this is what I want to do for the top three things in the first couple months, what would they be?
Well, if you look at a macro level, I think things that involve infrastructure improvements should be apolitical and they should be non-ideological. There are improvements that we have to make to water quality, the Hudson River, the Long Island Sound. I think those are unifying issues that will bring together multi-state, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Democrats and Republicans. Yeah. We'd like to make progress in that area. I'd like to see us make progress in transportation issues. As a county executive, I've run the second largest bus system in New York State, and we know that mass transit is important for the lifeblood of New York and Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, and so forth. Efforts in that area would be important, I think. And if we can deal with the affordability issues, that's what I heard more than any other single issue on the doors, is people want to have an opportunity to be able to afford things. And if we have strategies that can do that, I'm not convinced that adding tariffs do that. I'm not convinced that a massive deportation plan does those things. But we will see what strategies we can develop and which ones we can work on and get to common ground on.
There was just a poll done this past week about tariffs, and most Americans don't think the tariffs are what this country needs. And that's a big part of what Mr. Trump wants.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think this is settled in the minds of most economists. And we've had conservative Republican presidents in the past, Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, that wouldn't impose tariffs across the board because they saw that it was a negative impact, as well as Democratic presidents. So we'll have to see what the administration does over the course of their tenure. They take office January 21st, and their policies will roll out from that. Certainly, if you're going to impose a tariff on Canada, which is like, our best friend in the world, and you're going to punish the Canadian businesses that survive along with the Americans on the border between our two countries, that's not good for America. But again, we'll have to see, and we'll push back if we think that the strategies are bad. Okay,
we had a lot to talk about. I'm going to try to make it faster because we want to get to all the information.
Sure.
George. Let's talk about immigration, because that's a big issue. You know what the president says he's going to do, Mr. Trump. He wants to get everyone out of here that's not here legally.
Well, I think, first of all, there was an initiative that happened earlier in the year in the Congress that concluded its work in December, early January, to have a bipartisan effort, strengthen the border, make sure the border is properly secure, add personnel down there, add judges, come up with a better work plan. That seemed to be something that was getting support on both sides of the aisle. Bipartisan. That was stopped dead in its tracks. Yep. Now, the deportation strategy, insofar as you would identify people who have committed heinous crimes, and you can get that portion of the people who are here out right away, then you'd be doing something positive. Those individuals who've committed those crimes should not be here. I don't know how large a group that is out of an overall group of 12 million people. And if that is the first element and effort, then that would be one that would have some support. But I think when we talk about broad-based deportation, there's a million questions that come into it. You have to ask, how are people going to be housed in the period of time? How are they going to be received by the countries that are identified as their countries of origin? Will those countries accept them? Mm-hmm. There's a host of different issues to be dealt with. So on a campaign trail, anybody who's run for office, I've run for office a number of times, you watch your rhetoric because you're going to have to actually deliver on what you've said. And so you try to be a little more moderate when you're out there, because now you're going to find that it's very difficult to accomplish what you said you would. Let's focus on what is the smartest thing to do to try to improve the issue that faces us.
Democrats and Republicans, at least in our area, in the tri-state area are working on one thing together who don't live in Manhattan or New York City particularly, and that's congestion pricing. Starts January 5th.
Well, I think the issue with congestion pricing, Bill, we did chat about this the last time we were talking, is that it's become tied to the money that's needed for the MTA, which includes commuter rail, buses, and subways in New York City, to have the capital they need to survive. And the people who will say to me, and some, we're pretty divided in my home county, some favor it, some oppose it. Those that oppose it, I pose back to them, what's the alternative financing to do the capital budget that we need? And of course, there is no answer to it. Federal government should really step in and be much more supportive of mass transit in the New York and the other major metropolitan areas. I believe the MTA has 47% of the ridership of all mass transit riders in the country and gets 17% of the mass transit support. So that's clearly a discrepancy that could be solved by more federal money. Whether this administration is prepared to do that to help New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut is anybody's guess. But as it is, congestion pricing is a source of revenue to help us deal with it. Otherwise, we'll have a diminution in commuter rail. We'll have a diminution in our buses and subways in New York City. And the reduction of mass transit will only hurt our economy. It'll only make it harder for us to perform the way we're capable of performing.
We're running out of time, but I do want to get two more questions in very briefly. Number one, you talked about the status of New York and the economy. So many of people who live in your districts work here in New York City. What's the status of the economic aspect of New York City these days, from your point of view?
Well, I think you have to remember where we were during COVID. We had big chunks of the economy that was shut down. Certain industries, travel industry and so forth, were deeply affected by it. And even though it's 5 years from the spring, in some ways we're still coming out of the COVID realities. People are not back in their offices. I don't know that they'll ever go back in their offices the way they did before. You see the Monday, Friday commute is not what it was previously. Less people in Manhattan, less people purchasing and buying and so forth. So I think there's still a great difficulty out there. I see signs that the economy is improving. I've seen gas prices drop in the last year significantly. Food prices are still an issue, and healthcare costs are what I hear about. So when you look at housing, healthcare, food, and fuel, those seem to be the four major areas that people are frustrated by in terms of how they can afford and then their life. And then, of course, the question of being employed or fully employed. There's been some improvement in unemployment, but not necessarily advancement once you're in employment. People are getting stuck at the level they're at economically.
George Latimer, heading to Washington, freshman congressman from New York. George, really appreciate it. Good luck to you, and you're welcome here anytime. You got some news to make. We'll be glad to have it on up close. Good luck to you.
Bill, thanks a lot. Appreciate all your hard work.
Take care. Have a good move to Washington. See you later. Just ahead, another member of the freshman class in Congress, Laura Gillen from Long Island. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Up Close. Joining us now, Laura Gillen, the new member of Congress from New York's 4th Congressional District on Long Island. She defeated Republican incumbent Anthony D'Esposito, and Laura joins us now. I'm sorry, Congresswoman Gillen joins us now. The last time I saw you, you were running for office, and it seems like a couple years ago, but it was actually 2 months ago. How are you doing?
Yeah, it does feel like a long time ago, yes.
Congratulations.
Doing very well. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, we really were straight to work right after the election. We went down to DC for new member orientation, which was 10 days of lots of information and doing all the things we needed to do to get ready to come and be sworn in on January 3rd. And it's been a whirlwind of activity since then.
What's been your impression when you went down there? When you weren't a congressperson, but what was your impression when you went there?
Well, it's really exciting. It kind of makes the election and the results of the election real when you go to the Capitol and you're walking on the floor of the House and saying, wow, I work here. And it was great to have the opportunity to spend time with not only the members of my caucus and my delegation, but also with members from the other side of the aisle, the Republican freshmen coming in, and to try to get to talk to them and develop relationships so that going forward, when we are looking for bipartisan support, you have some friends on the other side to work on things. And so that was a really great part of it as well.
Did you establish that kind of a responsibility and personality with those people?
Absolutely. Wow. After we did the orientation in DC, there's an opportunity for new members to go up to Harvard and just go to a bunch of seminars. And again, the whole focus is on bipartisanship, and had a great time meeting some colleagues. In fact, one of the new freshmen from Florida grew up in my district. And so I invited him to come. And so we're going to look forward to planning trips to each other's districts in the future.
Well, it's so interesting. And I would love to have like a poll of people who in our audience who heard you just say that, because the reality for some people, and it's understandable, is that, this is like cutthroat in the Washington, D.C. there right now. And that bipartisanship is just sort of a pipe dream.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see in the media, a lot of the a lot of the hyper-partisan fights really get a lot of attention. But my sense with the colleagues coming in was, even if we don't ideologically agree on everything, a lot of the folks that I met just really wanted to come in to try to do good things for the American people. And it was great to sit down and chat with them. And I think they're all hoping that we can work across the aisle. Well, not all, but at least the folks that I talked to, they were really looking forward to that. And, I think when you get to DC, I'll find out in a couple of weeks. Sometimes it's easy to get put in your corner, but I'm really going to focus. I said to the constituents, that's not my interest. My interest is in making sure I know people on both sides of the aisle, and that I work with my colleagues on the Republican side as well. And
yet, America did not get that sentiment when we saw, in the last couple of weeks of the year, not exactly bipartisanship in Congress.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on right now is a little bit unfortunate. I'm very concerned about a government shutdown and the impact that it will have on families in my district and across the country. Hoping that it will be averted, but we'll see over the next couple of hours.
The flip side of that, Congresswoman, is that the people you met want bipartisanship, want to get the country on some sort of playing field that's even and not full of vitriol, and Americans want that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a message that we consistently gave during the campaign, whether it was on the doors, in our paid communications. People are sick of the fighting. They want Congress to actually do their job and get together and pass legislation that's going to have an impact on their lives and affect their bottom line. And that is what I am going to Congress to do. And leave the hyper-partisan fights aside. Donald Trump is going to be the president, and I hope to work with his administration on many of the things that were talked about during the campaign. For example, he came to my district and he said maybe he made the wrong decision when it came to salt. So I'd like to talk to him about making sure we restore the full state and local tax deduction for people in this district. It really impacts us. We pay among the highest property taxes in the nation. So look forward to working with the Trump administration and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to make sure we get that deduction back.
Well, that's the way to dive into the real nuts and bolts of this. So let's start with that, with salt. He's talked about it. He stopped salt deductions for all the blue states, and New York was hit hard. Your constituents were hit hard. But he wants to only bring it back to $20,000. And, for even middle class people in your district on Long Island, that's not what they gave up 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Right. Look, I'm going to push hard, and I know the Republicans in the New York delegations have mostly been in favor of restoring the full SALT deduction. So I look forward to joining the bipartisan caucus focused on this and working with the Trump administration to help the folks in this district and other districts who are dramatically impacted by this deduction.
We did, well, and it's true throughout the state. It's true throughout all the blue states and the highly taxed states. This is a much bigger deal, let's hope. So everyone cheering you may hear is coming from constituents that are around the state. There's no question about it in the tri-state area. What else would you want to look at as your main priorities as you start to become a congresswoman?
Well, day one, I said I was going to get to work on working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to secure our border and to have comprehensive immigration reform. That was a huge issue across the country. It was a huge issue in our district. I ran a lot of ads about it, and that is a top priority for me. In addition to that, addressing the scourge of anti-Semitism. During the campaign, I announced my anti-Semitism action plan to address this scourge, and I want to get to work right away on that. It's a bipartisan issue, and I do expect that I can get support on the other side of the aisle and start getting that legislation in place.
Mr. Trump has said he wants to put tariffs everywhere. The polls that came out this last week said 57% of Americans don't want any of these tariffs because it's going to hurt the economy. Where do you stand in all that, and what do you think is going to happen?
Yes, I mean, another huge issue in this past election cycle was the cost of living. It's just getting too expensive and too hard for middle-class families to get by and working-class families to get by. And, you can ask any economist, the effect of these tariffs on the cost of goods is going to be incredible. It's going to be inflationary like we haven't seen in a very long time, and it's going to be really, really hard for people to get by with the way costs will escalate on goods if these tariffs go into place. So I'm with the majority of Americans and think that they would be very harmful, and I'm not in favor of them.
One of the things that has caused controversy, a lot of controversy, is dying down right now a little bit, is the immigration crisis. Less of an immigration crisis right now, but it has been certainly in New York. What is your stance on all this? And what would you do if Mr. Trump does, as he said he would do on the campaign trail, come into a place like New York, and if anyone's not here legally, get them out of here? Because that's not the way New York City works.
Well, look, our immigration system has been broken for decades. Mm-hmm. It needs comprehensive reform, and it should be bipartisan reform. First of all, the majority in the House is so small that in order to pass legislation, it's likely that the Republicans will need some Democrats to come on board. It's an area where we should want to work together and have meaningful, long-lasting reform that will not just be thrown out whenever the other side gets in power, gets the majority. We need to reform our asylum system. We need to work with our immigration judges to find out how we can better expedite asylum claims. We need to make sure that we are creating a path of entry that incentivizes people to come here through the front door and not try to sneak in here. And we do need to deport some of the people who are here unlawfully. And Trump's new border czar said that he wants to prioritize deporting people who are committing crime or gang members who are here. And that's something that I'm certainly behind, and I think the majority of Americans are behind. In terms of the rhetoric, I'm going to throw everybody out who's not here legally. Well, I think that would be logistically quite difficult to do. And we have to see what that looks like. I mean, that's a lot of words, but actions are quite something different. So we'll see as the Trump administration comes into power and this new border czar gets going, what exactly that plan looks like.
Yeah. One issue that's become a hot issue in New York City and in all the outlying areas is congestion pricing. And it's not so much, the differences aren't so much about politics and party as it is about location, where you live. What's your stance on congestion pricing?
Look, I think it's just another tax on residents living in my district who need to go to travel to Manhattan by car for whatever reason. I do think the majority of people who commute to Manhattan from Long Island take the train already, and this is just a tax that is going to be harmful to my residents in their bottom line. It's also harmful to New York because we want to incentivize New York to experience growth, still continued growth after COVID, shut a lot of offices down. And I think adding another burden and reason for people to leave New York is not a helpful thing at this time.
We don't have much time. Good. And
I'm also dubious of whether or not it will really have a demonstrable impact on air quality. I think it's just going to be people will pay more, but you'll still have lots of people driving around Manhattan. Congresswoman,
we could talk for an hour, but I'm running out of time. I do want to ask you a personal question, because I think people don't ask questions like this of Congress people. Where are you going to live? I assume you're not a gazillionaire, so like some of the people who are now in the administration, billionaires. No. So it's a real problem because you don't become rich becoming a congressman.
No, I mean, that was one of the things on our to-do list when we were down for orientation was, okay, we're here, we have to hire our DC staff, and we have to find a place to live. So I spent my time touring apartments and trying to find one that was reasonably priced, which is difficult in the Metro DC area. But I think I'm almost there with an apartment and a place to live. But yes, it's 2 households, so that can get quite expensive fast.
There you go. We know that, but it's one of the things, the price you pay when you become a congresswoman, and you have become one. Laura Gillen, I want to say congratulations, and I hope you come on our show many times. in your term.
Thanks, Bill.
All right.
Thanks. Great
Good luck.
chatting with you today.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
See you later. And we'll be right back. And that's going to do it for this edition of Up Close. Tiempo with our pal Joe Torres is coming up next. If you missed any of today's programs, I'll post some of the segments. In fact, all of them. I'll post on my Facebook page. That'll happen tomorrow. And you can always watch the show on our podcast at your convenience at any of our ABC7 NY platforms. Thank you all for watching. I'm Bill Ritter, and for all of us here at Channel 7 Eyewitness News, we do wish you health and peace. And let's take care of each other.